Hey there, welcome to Jackster's Humans of Music. My name's Rod Yates, and if you're thinking, who the hell is Rod Yates and what's a Jackster? Let me tell you. Jackster is a giant resource of official music credits, so if you want to know who played on a piece of music, or who wrote it, or who engineered or produced it, you'd go to jackster.com. As for me, I've been writing about music for more than 2 decades and was the editor of Rolling Stone and Kerrang magazines in Australia. There's nothing I love more than sitting down with an artist and finding out about their life and career, the ups and downs of their journey, and the lessons they've learned. And that's what I'm going to be doing for the next hour with My Chemical Romance guitarist and solo artist, Frank Iero.
My first the overall shook. Embraced by disgrace, I pull rats in the place that I barking like dogs while we're held in like fools. I'm coming out,
That was Sewer Wolf, and it's taken from Frank Iero and the Future Violence' upcoming EP, Heaven is a Place, This is a Place, which is released this Friday, January 15th. So, Frank Iero was born into a family of drummers. As a child, he'd often go and see his dad and grandfather play in their respective bands, spending his nights in clubs intoxicated not by the rush of booze, but by the thrill of watching musicians at work. When it came time for Frank to launch his own career, he chose guitar over drums and hardcore and punk rock over blues and jazz. He found fame as a member of My Chemical Romance, releasing a handful of albums that would catapult the New Jersey band from half-empty punk rock clubs to the world's biggest stages before they split in 2012. My Chemical Romance reunited in 2019, and while Frank remains a member of that band, he is also focused on the career he launched during their hiatus, with acts such as Frank Iero and the Celebration, Frank Iero and the Patience, and his latest project, Frank Iero and the Future Violence. I caught up with Frank just before Christmas. He was snowed in New Jersey and I was in Sydney, and we talked about everything from his upbringing to what he learned from watching legendary 60s folk singer Richie Havens play live, from the rise of My Chemical Romance to his solo work, and much more. But we started by talking about Frank's new EP, Heaven is a Place, This is a Place, which is the follow-up to Frank Iero and the Future Violence 2019 album, Barriers. From what I understand, it's a bit of a companion EP to Barriers. Is that the case?
Yeah, it is. But however, I do feel like it can stand on its own 2 feet. I think what I really like about this EP is that it tells the whole story. Like, it starts from where we all kind of first met and goes up until the last song we ever recorded together.
Right. So when you say it starts from the place where you first met, was Violence one of the first songs that you wrote together?
It was one of the first songs that was written for the record, but even before that, the cover of Losing My Religion was the first thing that was recorded with myself, Evan, my brother-in-law, who was also in Patience, but was in the Future Violence, and Kaylee Goldsworthy, who we months after this recording recruited officially to be in the band.
Right. So so the recordings of this predate Barriers?
That recording does.
Okay. And from what I understand, so it seems to be split into 2 distinct halves, I guess. And the first half with Violence and Sewer Wolf are more abrasive, and the second half of the EP is a little gentler. Is it right that the first 2 songs, they sort of deal with the concept of violence?
Yes, and the blurred lines, I think, of what some people consider violence, what some people consider love and affection, and how that can sometimes be commingled and affect you mentally and physically. And
is that something that you've experienced?
Yes, and it's also, though, not fully based on in my personal experiences, but also things that I've become privy to as I've lived my 39 years.
And the lyrics to Sewer Wolf, on the day I was born, the skies shattered and wept. You best believe it was something to see, baby. Savior-born sinner delivered his flesh. Such amazingly colourful imagery. Who
Thank you.
Who, in terms of who has influenced your lyric writing and who has made you think of your lyrics in that way and to try and include such colourful imagery, who do you think about?
Oh man, well that particular line, I drew a lot of influence on that song in particular from Danzig and from Phil Anselmo. I think I was like, what would the origin story for Glenn be? Like, how would he describe the day that he was born?
Right.
And So yeah, I tried to write his autobiography, I think, on that one.
Have you? Does Glenn know about this?
I don't know. I don't think you know. Nah, I don't. I'm sure he doesn't Google his name all the time.
But someone
But
like
if he
Glenn,
does, he might now. I don't know.
someone like Glenn Danzig was very important to you growing up, though, wasn't he? With
Oh my God, absolutely, yeah.
your love of the Misfits. So, as a teenager, when you were first discovering the Misfits and you were hearing Danzig sing, is this the kind of imagery that were you sort of thinking, wow, this guy sounds like he was born when he was born when the sky shattered?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's different. I've met a lot of people that I look up to or love over the years, and I've had some great experiences and I've had some terrible experiences. But the people that I really, really appreciate, or really, really love, like I try to maybe stray away from, because I don't want to ruin it,
Mm.
And I know that it can be sometimes. So like Glenn's somebody that like I've had almost like the almost interaction, but I've been too scared to actually like meet him. But I've heard stories about, like different people meeting him. And one in particular was a friend of mine, Matt, was on an airplane, and Glenn got on the airplane. And after the flight or whatever, Matt went up to him and was like, Glenn, I'm a huge fan, I just wanted to say, like, we were on the same flight together. And he said to my friend Matt, he's like, oh yeah, you probably thought this motherfucker was gonna go down when you saw me get on. Like, and he was like, wow, like, like the impression that like, yeah, Glenn is so evil that God would try to strike the entire airplane down when he entered on. Like, I think, I think that's the persona, right? Is that he's he's evil incarnate.
You mentioned you've had the opportunity to meet some people and you've had some really great experiences. Who was at the top of your mind when you were saying that, when you're thinking about that?
I would say Ian MacKaye was one of the greatest interactions I've ever had. Ian, of course, from Minor Threat to Fugazi to now the Corky record, like just an artist and a thinker that I've followed and looked up to for so long. I was scared when I went to the Discord offices and the Discord house to hang out and kind of meet him, and it couldn't be kinder and more humble, and he was just so forthcoming with knowledge and stories and just so cordial and amazing to be around. So he's definitely one of them. Richie Havens was was of course an unbelievable talent and songwriter and guitar player and singer, but also somebody that I looked up to from the moment my dad brought me to go see him, like when I was a teenager. And I remember he had a very huge influence on me, where I remember going to see the show, of course, being in awe of his playing and his storytelling too, of like how he was the one that taught Jimi Hendrix how to play All Along the Watchtower and like all of these things. He's the first performer to perform at Woodstock, and you just like, it's unfathomable the experiences this man has had, and the things that he's seen. And then at the end of the show, he beelines it, to the back of the room. And you think, oh, okay, well, he played a show, he's out of here. But no, what he did was he stood at the back of the room door and shook everyone's hand that came out to the show.
Wow.
And I was just like, wow, that's cool.
How old were you that first time when you saw Richie Havens and you saw him going to the back of the room and standing there and shaking everyone's hand?
I mean, maybe 13, maybe 14.
Okay. And did that imprint on you? Did that sort of stick to you? Like, okay, so if I'm ever in the opportunity to do this, that's how I want to be?
Yes, absolutely. And then I started to realize how much that takes out of you. And I was like, damn, Richie must play like only a few shows a year. No, it does, man. It's if you can do it, if you can give it, it's so rewarding to get to meet people and to put that smile on their face and to have that human connection. But there does come a time where it's hard to do that every single night in, night out. And that's when you start to realize like, oh, this is how I get real sick from like talking to people for hours and giving hugs and handshakes and stuff like that. And then you start to, have to try to choose your battles a little bit better, unfortunately. But yeah, that was something that absolutely stuck with me. And I tried to emulate as much as I possibly could.
Yeah. And in terms of, because I know that your dad was a drummer and your grandfather was a drummer, and you would accompany both of them to shows.
Yeah.
And I believe that you were actually given a Smurfs drum kit at the age of 3. So they were trying to reel you in.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Very much so.
So how old were you? How old were you when you would start to go and see your dad play in jazz blues clubs, and then your grandfather play in Dixieland and big band jazz?
Well, my grandfather, he would play this local speakeasy every weekend. He would play the Friday and Saturday gigs. I mean, I probably was going to see my grandfather from the moment they could get me, and have a night out, because he would go on around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, or something like that. Mm. So I'm 5, 6,
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was a little bit different. There were certain clubs he knew he could sneak me into, and they wouldn't give him a big problem. And then there was others that either the club or my mom would have a fit about. I remember there were certain times when he'd have a gig and I would go and I'd have to hide if like the ABC came, which is like the Alcohol Beverage Commission. There was a couple times where I had to, like, there was like a booth, like a diner booth kind of thing where you would sit and they'd be like, all right, yo, they used to call me Paco because Frank is Paco in Spanish. And that was my nickname. They'd be like, Paco, go hide in the booth. And I would have to go in this booth and they would put all the coats on top of me so that the ABC wouldn't find me in there. And those are a couple of times he would be like, all right, listen, I'm not saying lie, but maybe you don't have to tell your mom that you went to that one, So I was in those clubs like when I was young, and back then too, like people still smoked and stuff back then, man. Like it was a scene, man. It was like real hazy and it was an experience. But what I loved so much about it was, of course, the music, getting to see like, my dad and my grandfather in their element, like doing what they love, like, watching them not break a smile, for hours. Like that was huge for me. But also too, like I felt like when I went back up to my mom's, because like my dad lived about an hour and a half, so I would visit my dad on the weekends. That's where I would go see them. And then during the week, I would go back up to my mom's house in Belleville and go to school. And it was like, I had this like double life, like it was like being a superhero. Like, during the week, mild-mannered kid goes to like a parochial grammar school, but on the weekends he's a jazz musician. Like that's crazy, especially too, like when I got to the point of like you said, like when I was 3, I got the Smurfs drum kit and stuff like that, and I never wanted to be a drummer, but like every weekend, like my dad would try to give me a drum lesson, so I could I could play a shuffle, or I could keep 4 on the floor. And so like I remember being around 10 and my grandfather was in this 3-piece Dixie, that wasn't a Dixieland band. It was like more like a standard. It was him, a sax player and an accordion player. And I remember for this one gig at the speakeasy, the sax player, he wanted to play, but he wanted my grandfather to sing the song. So I sat in and I played drums for like 2 or 3 songs.
Wow.
And my grandfather being like, yeah, all right, just don't get excited. He would always say like, hey, Frankie, don't get excited, just leash, and he would shake his hand at me like the tempo, and he'd be like, just shuffle and stay here. And so I would do that, and my grandfather got up and sang like a couple of Frank Sinatra tunes and stuff like that. And that was, I mean, really, that was my first gig. I mean, it wasn't a full gig, but like I played like 2 or 3 songs. And yeah, and then, afterwards, if you stayed up late enough, you got to go to the diner with all the jazz guys and just, see them in their element, man. And it was so cool. Like, you don't get that education just going to school.
Hey there, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Jackster's Humans of Music. My name's Rod Yates, and I'm speaking with My Chemical Romance guitarist and solo artist, Frank Iero. And is it true as well that your dad worked at the record plant, recording studio in New York?
That's correct.
Did he come home with stories? Did he tell you stories about some of the artists that he ever saw recording there?
Yeah. Here's the thing. Like, he worked there. I guess up until like right before I was born.
Okay.
So, and then later on, he ended up he was an editor over at Modern Drummer magazine. So like the stories would be like these stories from the past that I would hear later on when I was old enough to hear some of those stories. But
Okay.
it wasn't like oh, I came home from record plant today and this and this and this happened. It was like, no, like I was maybe 10 hearing stories about when he worked on the Kiss session, or like he like helped out with right before John and Yoko got back together for Double Fantasy, like or starting over rather. He was working on the Yoko record. He was around in that vein, and he did some like commercial sessions and stuff like that at the studio. But he was like a project manager, basically, like kind of putting together schedules and seeing who needed to come in here and there, and doing whatever kind of session work needed to be done.
So music is in your blood. I mean, when you made the decision to pursue music, did your father's experience make it easier? Did he understand your fascination with music and why you wanted to pursue it?
It was a twofold thing, right? Like, he understood. Nobody understands more than a musician. Getting bit by that bug, but at the same time, no one understands the pitfalls more than a musician. And so I think it was a bittersweet day for him when he was like, "Ah, shit!" Like, like I did this to you, and I know all the heartbreak you're going to go through, and I don't want that for you. Like, I want you to stay in school. I want you to have a better go at it than I did, because I know that there's music and then there's the music business, and one very often doesn't have anything to do with the other one, and it's an industry that doesn't often love you back. So I think he was scared for me, but at the same time, I mean, a pirate's kid's going to be a pirate, right?
That's it. And you mentioned that you split your time between your parents. I know that they split when you were quite young. I think you were about 3,
Yeah.
and they divorced when you were 7.
Correct.
At that age, do you just accept it? Is that this is just what's happening, or did that split have a big impact on you?
I think it had a big impact on me in that the repercussions of that were huge for my mom and her mental health and eventual trajectory in her life. But as far as like the split, I didn't know. Like, I know that they were together till I was 3, living in the same house, but I don't remember that. Like, I don't remember waking up to my dad being there.
Yeah.
So like, that wasn't something that like I mourned. I just hated that there was like a lot of turmoil and fighting and how it ultimately affected me just through like how she became and things of that nature. But but as far as it, me wishing it different, I didn't really know what different was.
Sure. And you mentioned, I guess, the impact that it had on your mother, and you've spoken in the past about her issues with addiction and mental illness. And I saw an interview with you where you were saying that growing up, you almost felt, concerned for your parent. It's almost as if at points you had to become the caregiver. Were you forced to grow up quite quickly?
I mean, I guess so. There's certain things that you end up having to go through. It's a hard question to answer because I don't know any different.
Sure.
I only know the way that I grew up, and yes, going if I could go back, would I wish things could have been a bit different? Yes, but at the same time, you end up where you end up, and I feel like everything does happen for a reason, and I made it out the other side, and I feel very fortunate for the life that I have and the family that I have, and it was just that was my journey. I hate saying this because I think this phrase is pointless, but it is what it is, kind of thing.
Of course. I mean, you've I guess got to a point in your life where you perhaps feel more comfortable at least addressing some of these issues in your songs. I'm thinking about a song like Young and Doomed off Barriers, or Veins, Veins, Veins off your 2016 album, Parachutes.
Right.
And I think those songs in particular a concern with the issue of predeterminism. Is that correct? That the idea that, well, perhaps some of these traits get passed down from generation to generation, whether you have basically have no say in it. Is that correct? And is that a concern that you have had?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we are what makes us up. And I do think we have a say in, what we do with that. But I think we have to be aware that there is this predisposition to or these pre-dug graves along the way. You know what I mean? There are quite a few pitfalls for everybody, but I think some of us have more of a minefield to traverse than others. One of the greatest things I think I have been taught along the way of, at least in my musical career, that really did translate to my personal life and my mental health was from Ross Robinson. And he would always say, these things that we so often say happened to us, in fact happened for us. And it's easy to blame the world or to blame these experiences, when we should actually embrace them and be thankful for the things that we were strong enough to survive, and their gifts is what they are. And especially when you make it out the other side.
So when was the moment that you realized that you wanted to pursue music?
I think it happened. Well, here's the deal, right? So like I knew I wanted to play music, and I had drums under my belt a little bit, but I didn't want to be a drummer because I really did want to write songs. And so I tried to find my way. My mom made me play piano. I hated it, even though I wish I didn't now. I mean, I wish I stuck with it. But I went from that, and then I went to saxophone. This was all because of school, I think, and didn't really get that. That didn't really bite me either, but what I really wanted was to get a guitar. Finally, I think I was in 6th or 7th grade. I think it was 7th grade, actually. I got a guitar for my birthday, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then realized I have no idea how to play this, and it's hard, So for a couple of months, all the guitar was for me was something I put on, strapped it on around my neck, and played along to my favorite songs in the mirror, and I did this for months. And of course, that was the thing you would tell everybody. Yeah, I play guitar. You tell all your friends, I got a guitar. I play it. And then what happened was there was going to be a school assembly. And I remember the teacher had come in. His name was Mr. Kreismer, and he was our music teacher, and he wanted to do a song for the assembly to show off for the parents. And he said, is there anybody in this class that plays another instrument, preferably a guitar? And I almost shit my pants because I had told everybody in this fucking class that I play guitar, but I didn't really know how to play it. And of course, my best friend raises his hand, and I was like, oh, good. Maybe he plays. And then realized that, no, he doesn't play. And he was like, Frank knows how to play guitar. So I was caught. And I said, yes, I do know how to play guitar. And he gave me the music, and I went home that night, and I had a month to learn how to play guitar. And that's what I did. I in order to not seem like a horrible liar, I learned how to play guitar, and I loved it. I fucking loved it. So I taught myself all the chords that I needed. I know I needed maybe between 5 to 6 chords to play this one song, maybe G, D, A, all the major chords, nothing too crazy. And so I had these song books, from Nirvana Nevermind, or oh gosh, probably a Rage book or something like that. So you would look at the top of those tablature books, and they would have the chord shapes and how to play them. And so I would find them in all the books. I wrote it out on a piece of paper, what I needed to learn for this song, and learn those chords, and play the assembly, and played the assembly, and it went off without a hitch. And then I started to take those chords that I knew, and I started to, now, all right, now I know these 6 chords. All right, great. So three of them is going to be my verse, and then three of them are going to be my chorus. And I would start to write songs with the 6 chords I knew.
Yeah.
And that's when it happened. When I wrote my first song, and it was horrible. That's fine. You know what I mean? But I wrote a song, and that moment there was like, holy shit, this is it. This is what I want to do. I can do this, you know? And I think that was the moment where I really, I never put it down.
And you were about, what, 13 at that time?
No, I was 7th, 8th grade, you know? So I don't know, 11, 12, I guess.
Okay.
13's when I joined my first band and I played my first show.
We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back in a few minutes with more from Frank Iero on Volume, Channel 106, SiriusXM. And my special guest is My Chemical Romance guitarist and solo artist, Frank Iero. So you spend your high school years playing in bands and learning about punk rock and about the Jersey punk scene, and eventually you arrive at Prency Pep, which is your first proper band, I guess, you know, the first band to release a record on an actual label.
Yes.
And I read a story about you getting a gig at First Avenue in Minneapolis and how exciting that was. And you booked a bunch of shows around it, so it became this little tour. Now, unfortunately, that First Avenue show didn't end up happening, but in the past, you've said that you learned more in that month of touring than you did in 12 years at school. What did you learn?
I think the biggest thing you learn is that there is a huge world out there that you don't get, you don't get a handle on just kind of walking around your town. You know, you could be the biggest fish in that little pond, and doesn't mean a fly shit, comparatively. And to be 16, 17, in a van with your friends, no parents around, just driving around. I mean, it's huge. It changes your worldview. And you start to figure out ways that, survival skills, you start to figure out how to get along with one another, or, how to push each other's buttons. You start to, that age old question of, do I eat tonight or do I buy cigarettes? Like, these are things that you inevitably every young man has to figure out, or young woman has to figure out. That was amazing, man. I remember those nights, just driving along the highways of the U.S. With no responsibilities except for keeping yourself alive and playing music, every night. Like, everything was new. You're just doing it for the love of it, and those experiences, I wouldn't trade for anything. Is
it ever that pure again?
It's easy to forget, but important to remember. That's a very good question, and it's a hard one to answer. I think that it is pure for as long as you can afford it to be. And that could be your own doing, financially, of course. Yeah, that's a big deal. I think it's very pure in the beginning when you don't have responsibilities, and then it can be pure again when you don't need the money. But as far as spiritually, I think you can hold on to that pureness for as long as you allow yourself to.
I read a story that it may have been around this time of Prency Prep, or while you were in another band during that time, but you worked at Staples. And and one of the ways that you would get your band's gigs is by photocopying flyers for other bands and I guess smuggling them out of the store. Is that true?
Oh, 100%. The copy center at Staples, I don't know if it still is, but back then, oh my God, it was the honey hole. Like, you would get, minimum wage or whatever, and we would go to promoters that were putting on shows in Jersey and be like, hey, listen, you put us on this show and we'll give you 1,000 flyers for free. You just come in and pick them up. And we do stuff like that.
Right.
And so, and we would do a pretty good job with it too. Like, that was the only time we actually excelled. Like, you know what I mean? Like, when you were doing stuff for your band.
And of course, your life changed pretty dramatically a couple of years later when you joined My Chemical Romance. And obviously those early years of touring with My Chemical Romance were not glamorous. They were very hard. And I presume some of that work that you did with Prency Prep, I guess, prepped you for those endless hours in the van, endless miles playing not great shows. But when your life did change and things did start to take off for the band, what surprised you most about it? Because no doubt as a kid growing up, you have an idea about what it's like to make it, what it's like to be successful. But I imagine the reality can be quite different. What surprised you about it?
I think the biggest surprise was putting in the hard work and having it pay off. Because for years and years and years, you're working, and it's still just your friends at the shows. You're still just, you're playing these venues where you have to sell, 50 tickets to open up for the pie tasters or something, and and it's still, you're still like paying out of pocket and making all your friends pay $10 to come see you, and that's hard, man. That can be really disheartening. But to be in a band and to tour and to just grind, man. I mean, we just got in a van and didn't come home.
Yeah.
Like we just did it. And you're sleeping on people's floors and whatever you got to do to make it to the next show. And again, choosing, cigarettes or food every step of the way. And it was paying off. Like, when we would hit a venue in Chicago, we played a couple of kids opening up, for another band. And then the next time we would be there, there'd be 10 kids for us. And it was like, whoa, like this is happening. But I think also too, like, at that moment, when all that was happening, not only were we working really hard, but the internet was working for us. And that was something that Pensy didn't really have, or any bands that I was in before that. That was not something I was privy to. Like, MySpace was just kicking off, and you had like those sites like Makeout Club and all that stuff, like, but like MySpace was huge, and we put up a song, a demo or something like that, and all of a sudden, like, there's kids in far away cities that are hearing the song, and when you come to their city, they're coming to see you play, and they know the song. Like, that was holy shit. Like, that was light bulbs going off, like fireworks, really. So that was a tool that was new and was at our disposal and really worked well for us. But as far as other things that you learn, I was I think the only one in that band when My Chem started that had actually toured before. So it felt good. Like, I was the youngest one in the band, but I had this one little tidbit of knowledge, so that I could kind of like puff my chest and be like, oh, well, when we toured, we would do the, it was like so silly. I mean, but it felt nice to have that little bit of knowledge. So, you'd have the ear of everybody in the van of, the best way to siphon gas or whatever you were up to that night. But, but then that knowledge lasted very, very little amount of time, because by that point we were all in on uncharted territory, and we were all learning. And I think the biggest thing for early My Chem was realizing, regardless of whatever, differences you may have in that band or different walks of life you come from, like, when you're on tour, it is the five of you versus the world. You have to have each other's backs no matter what. And because you're locked in a band together, man, you're making music every night, you're on that stage, and that stuff translates, so that brotherhood and that camaraderie, I think, was really, really important. And it's not easy, it's not easy when you're different people and sometimes don't always get along. But it's a lot, it's like this band of brothers type deal. And you consider tour like war.
And that shone through. I remember you reading stories about you back then, and that brotherhood shone through, and there was almost a sense of wariness of outsiders, or perhaps it was of success, but they very much felt like it was you against the world. Were
100%.
you? Was there a wariness of, as success started to come, were you suspicious of it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think also too, though, again, it was the time, we were coming up, and at that moment, like, these are not my words. This is things that we were being told at the time, was that, New Jersey is the next Seattle. And of course, like, everything's the next Seattle after their Nirvana days, like, everybody was looking for that next hotbed. And Jersey was the flavor of the month, like, Thursday was coming out of Jersey. We had Saves the Day and Midtown, and, we'll call Taking Back Sunday Jersey too, because Long Island's not that far away, but like all these bands were getting recognized and noticed and taken, to the next level in the majors. And at that moment, My Chem had released, a single for Vampires Will Never Hurt You on MySpace, and we were getting calls at the practice studio from major labels. It was fucking weird, you know, and we had seen, a lot of like bad shit, like like what Thursday had to go through with Victory, and what Taking Back Sunday had to go through with Victory, and all, all these things that were like, oh man, like, there's some sharks out there, and so for us to be a young band, release one song, and have people calling and asking about the band, it was like, they don't even know who we are. We don't even know who we are. So how the fuck do they know? And it didn't seem like anyone had our best interests at heart but us. So yeah, I think we were leery. I don't know if we were leery of success. I think we were just leery of what people wanted from us. And I think we were very keen on figuring out what the band was first before we took it and worked with anyone else. We wanted to have a partner in it, but it's hard to bring anyone else in when you don't know what you have.
And I imagine having that sensibility at that sort of early stage in your career makes it tough when success comes and certain things get taken out of your control. That's how you're perceived by the media or by the press or by other people. And, all of a sudden you guys get held up as the poster boys for emo. How did you cope with that? How did you deal with it? Do you just have to let that roll over you?
I mean, eventually, yes. It's very out of your hands. Like, deep down that it's lazy, but people feel more comfortable when they can label you, no matter what that label is, whether it fits or not. They need to have something to say, like, oh yeah, oh, what's that band? Oh, what's it sound like? Oh, what's it called? It's like, well, I could sit here and I could describe it to you for 2.5 minutes, or you could just listen to the song. You're like, no, I don't want to listen to the song. Just tell me what is it. And it's like, oh Jesus. The weird position to be put in is when all these people that haven't listened to the song have all these words to describe you and all this these bands to lump you in with, and then the bands that you look up to or feel a kindred spirit with then start to either talk shit or get mad at you because other people have said that you're this or that, and they don't feel like you are. You know what I mean? Like, that's when things get fucking real murky and weird. And then you start to get even more insulated because you don't trust anybody. You don't feel like you really belong anywhere or have a home anywhere. Coming from an underground scene, just being kids playing VFW halls, and working your balls off, like just touring and touring and touring, and then all of a sudden people are saying, like, because the touring and the work is paid off, and a lot of people listen to your music now, that you're somehow not worthy to be associated with the scene anymore, or like the underground. And it's like, oh man, it's a hard pill to swallow, when that kind of stuff happens. Yeah. But really, I mean, it's all defense mechanism if you think about it. Sure. Everybody's just trying not to get hurt, and I get it. I've been there too. Like, I was a kid that got a punk rock mixtape from my friend, and all of a sudden I was had the fucking doctorate in punk rock. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we all, we do that shit. It's, I didn't have an internet account where I could fucking spew my ignorance like it was, written on a sacred scroll. But, I had my own opinions about things. I'm sure that I was very, very vigilant about, but it gets to be a bit much to bear when you realize it's just like, we're just making art that we believe in and we love. You could like it, or you don't have to, or you could listen to it, or you don't have to. And ultimately, with all due respect, like, your opinion doesn't fucking matter.
Hey there, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Jackster's Humans of Music. My name's Rod Yates, and I'm speaking with My Chemical Romance guitarist and solo artist Frank Iero. When did you get comfortable as an arena band? Like, when did you get comfortable stepping on stage at Reading with Brian May coming out to play with you? Like, that's light years away from traveling around playing in vans to 10 people. But at some point, did you become comfortable on stages of that size and with that kind of production?
Yeah, no and yes. Here's the thing. If you continuously do ridiculous shit it becomes, part of your everyday. But if you were to take a step back and really think about what you're doing, who could feel comfortable doing that? It gets to a point where that's just what you do, and you get up on stage and you do what you do, and that bubble that you used to have within your 5 bandmates, you know what I mean? You still have that on a stage. Not being the lead singer or the front man of the band, I didn't need to look past the first 4 rows. And that was how I got through it, because the lights were bright and you really didn't have to look out that far. And that's a little bit easier to deal with. I don't know how Gerard was able to engage 80,000 people, on any given night. That is a very, very difficult job. I imagine for me, it would take years off my life doing that, but he was very, very good at it. And so thank God for that, because I don't want that fucking job.
Yeah.
But then there's things where you just, I guess you kind of you grow a callus, not grow callus, but you grow a callus, like your fingers from playing so much. You grow a callus or a protective shield against the ridiculous, where it's like, oh, tomorrow we're going to Brian May's house to rehearse in his living room for a giant festival show in 2 days where we play in front of 100,000 people, and we're going to play a Queen song, and he's going to play our song with us. And you're like, okay. And if you allow yourself to really think about that, you're going to freak out and you're going to fuck it up. So you can't. You just have to, be like, yes, Brian, this is a great cup of tea. Thank you so much. Let's just, you want to play that one again? Do you know what I mean? And it's insane.
Yeah. And look, so obviously My Chemical Romance comes to an end. You've got back together since, but at that point it comes to an end, and you start doing Frank Iero and the Celebrations, or obviously there was Death Spells as well, but I guess you start charting the next phase of your career. And, I remember speaking to Brian Fallon when he released Local Honey, and he was saying how hard it is to get people to be interested when you've been in a successful band to then do solo work. And I appreciate that Frank Iero and the Celebrations, and the Patience and the Future Violence, they're not strictly solo acts, but your name is out front. And anyway, he was just saying that it's hard. It's really hard to get people interested. Have you had any experience in that regard?
I think he's half right on that. I think that, yes, it's hard to have people kind of put a hiatus on what they think they know about you and what you should be playing and the type of music that you should be playing or the songs that you should be playing, and focus on, what you're doing now. I think that that's a difficult job, but don't think for a second that you're not extremely fortunate to start at 20. Coming from a successful band like I have, or like Brian has, there is an audience there that is curious, whether they're curious because they love your work, or whether they're curious in a morbid, curious fashion where they just can't wait to see you fucking fail at something else. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be an ear there. So the pressure is a little bit more. And whether or not you can keep those ears there is a little bit harder. But I think I know what he's saying about, trying to get them focused on the new thing,
right,
like what you're doing now, and not just kind of have this nostalgic view of the things that you used to do, come to your shows and maybe call out, Gaslight songs. Like I imagine it's probably a lot harder if I were, say, for Brian or for Gerard or something like that. Like no one's coming to like a Frank show or like a Future Violent show and being like, play Not Okay. Like nobody wants to, you know what I mean? Like I didn't sing Not Okay. Like they don't want to fucking hear me sing Not Okay.
Sure.
So like that's not going to happen. But I imagine that there may be an anticipation for the singers of those bands,
sure,
to have somebody come out and want to hear the old stuff.
The interesting thing from your perspective is that you've said many times that you never really wanted to be the front man, and now you are, and you're not really getting the opportunity to do that, playing to 2 people and build it up from there. You've got this audience interested who want to see what you're like as a front man. There's a pressure there.
it's nice to have an audience interested in what you have to say and what you're about to do. But the pressure can be overwhelming, especially too, I would say in the beginning when I wrote a record in my basement by accident and did not ever expect it to come out. I'm speaking about Stomach Aches. And then all of a sudden, it's out, and I come to the realization that I do want to give this a try, but also realize that I've never done this before, really. And those first couple of shows, you're sweating bullets, man, and there's a lot of people waiting just to see what you can do, And the first celebration tour was, I think it was opening for Taking Back Sunday in the Used, so they're full rooms.
Wow.
And that was a lot to do. And I mean, hey, I'm the type of person though, like when I find out about an opportunity, if it scares the shit out of me, that's when I know I have to say yes. So that's exactly what I did.
Right. And are you comfortable now in that role?
Never. No, I mean, well, a little bit more. I think it took me. It was a learning curve trying to figure out that I can do this on my own terms. I don't need to be the quintessential front man of a band like anybody else has done it. I can still be my awkward self, and I can have bad days, and I can have good days, and I can have a conversation with an audience using my own voice. I don't need to get up there and be like, "Hey, you motherfuckers doing tonight?" Yeah, like high kicks and shit like that. That's just not me. So you're not going to get that. It took me a while to realize how do I feel comfortable doing this, and is this something I do want to do? And once I figured it out, I got a little bit more comfortable, and I started to really, find my voice, pun intended, I guess.
Yeah, nice. Frank, just before we finish up, Jackster is all about giving credit where credit is due. Are there people that you would give credit to for helping you get where you are today?
I feel like it's all me. So no.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, all right, yeah. No, I mean, yeah. The people that definitely come to mind are my high school friend. We're still best friends, John McGuire, who I met my freshman year of high school. He's the one that maybe joined my first band. He was a senior at the time and heard that I play guitar, and he was like, "I'm coming over your house. You got to prove to me that you play guitar." And I had to play him a song that I had learned, and it was like, "All right, cool. We're starting a band. And we have a show in 3 weeks." And that was the first show I ever played. And he's always been this kid that he was an old soul, man. He made me my first mixtapes. Introduced me to punk rock, and if it weren't for him, I don't think I would have gotten out of my basement as quickly as I did. He was also the bass player in Pensy Prep. Ross Robinson. I feel like I learned so much more about my playing and myself as a person working on Parachutes with him than I ever have before. He's an amazing friend and an amazing talented producer, and just I love him. Thank God for him. And I have to say, all the Mike Hem dudes, Gerard and Mikey and Ray, they were my big brothers in the original 12 years of touring together. I grew up in those 12 years. That was my schooling. They looked out for me. We experienced so many amazing things together, and I love their families. Our kids are all friends, and it's really amazing to see where we all ended up and how much our lives are different now from where we started. So yeah, and then I guess maybe the last two would be Stacy Fass, who was the first person Mike Hem ever hired. She's our lawyer. She was our lawyer and became our manager. She's kind of looked out for us forever and has become like the surrogate mom, to all the guys and stuff. And then Lauren Valencia, who entered the picture with Mike Hem a little later on, but became such an incredible force. I think she's the reason that Mike Hem lasted as long as it did that first time. And unfortunately, she passed away a couple of years ago. She was such a shining light in all of our lives, and we miss her every day.
Well, Frank, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all your story. It's been great to chat with you today.
My pleasure, Bob. Thank you so much for taking the time.
And that's it for another episode of Jackster's Humans of Music. A big thanks to Frank for his time, and thank you for listening. This episode was mixed by Lachlan Mitchell from Parliament Studios in Sydney, and the theme song and incidental music were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. You can catch a brand new episode of Jackster's Humans of Music on Mondays at 1 p.m. East, 10 a.m. West, with repeat airings throughout the week. And you can listen to Humans of Music whenever you want with the SiriusXM app, which is free for most subscribers. So download it today and search Humans of Music to start listening outside the car.
Hey, what's happening, guys?